Chapter 35:11. As soon as he said this, the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three changed. Duan Huali's words were very impolite. It was obvious that he was targeting Di Beichen. However, Di Beichen smiled faintly and said casually, "Since I said that I can solve it, I can solve it. Senior brother Duan, you don't have to worry too much." Looking at Di Beichen's attitude, Duan Huali couldn't help but frown. He didn't expect this Di Beichen to be so arrogant to say such words to him. Junior brother Di, when Chu Jinfeng saw that the situation wasn't quite right, he hurriedly walked over and said, "Duan Huali, junior brother Di and the others were already very unhappy after being set up this time. Let them settle the grudges between them. Why do you need to worry about such a small matter? Once you take action, everything will be fine. After all, young people also need to experience their own experiences." Duan Huali, who was about to explode, was suddenly rebutted by Chu Jinfeng's words. However, Chu Jinfeng's words were very smooth, and it made his expression much better. Most of the foreign disciples are newborn calves who aren't afraid of tigers. This kind of arrogance will be smoothed out sooner or later. As soon as he finished speaking, Duan Huali was too lazy to say anything more to Di Beichen. He directly returned to his team and sat down to rest. "This guy is too shameless." Shangguan Yingying sneered. "Our arrogance? The one who is too arrogant is him, right? This kind of peacock-like guy likes to spread his tail no matter who he sees. If you don't give him a chance to show off, he will naturally be very unhappy." Bailey Hongzhuang shrugged. "Actually, you don't have to pay attention to it at all. Just treat it as a joke." As soon as Bailey Hongzhuang finished speaking, the expressions of Chu Jinfeng and the others changed. Ziren couldn't help but give a thumbs up. "Hongzhuang, you really saw through Duan Huali's nature at a glance." Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows slightly. "Of course. Let him do his own one-man show. When it's over, he will naturally leave. If I knew that my wife was so calm, I would have just ignored him." Di Beichen smiled and looked at Bailey Hongzhuang. Bailey Hongzhuang smiled. "I see that you don't intend to take care of him. At least I managed to say a few more words to him and wasted a few seconds. Then you don't need to say a word. I'll listen to my wife." On the side, Chu Jinfeng watched Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen echo each other and couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Previously, he was worried that some kind of conflict would break out. It turned out that Di Beichen and the others completely treated Duan Huali as a joke. If Duan Huali knew what Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were thinking, he would probably die of anger. "I have to hand it to you guys, but I also agree, Chu Jinfeng laughed. "In the future, you guys better stay away from Duan Huali. This guy is not a good person. Don't be fooled by his usual sanctimonious appearance. He has done a lot of shady things behind the scenes, especially when he is interested in women. You guys have to be careful." Thinking of this, Chu Jinfeng still reminded Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. "Thank you for the reminder. We will be careful." A faint, complicated light flashed across Di Beichen's deep, dark eyes as he responded. Chapter 35:12. After receiving Chu Jinfeng's warning, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three felt a little complicated. Based on their interactions with Chu Jinfeng during this period of time, they had some understanding of his character. Since he could deliberately warn them, it proved that Duan Huali was indeed not someone to be trifled with. At the very least, Duan Huali's position in the inner hall was definitely higher than Chu Jinfeng's. Otherwise, Chu Jinfeng would not have taken him into consideration. Duan Huali returned to his team, still feeling a little unhappy. It was not easy to find a woman that he was interested in, but he did not expect that there would be a blind fellow who kept on causing trouble. He did not even have a chance to express himself. This feeling made him very unhappy. One had to know that with his status in the inner hall, very few people dared to speak to him like this. What? You've taken a fancy to that woman? After noticing Duan Huali's unhappy expression, Peng Kairui walked up to him and asked with a smile. Hearing Peng Kairui's words, Duan Huali raised his eyebrows. Don't you think that this woman looks very different? Compared to the goods in the inner hall, she's much better. Speaking of this, Duan Huali's eyes flashed with an evil light. He had basically seen all the outstanding women in the inner hall. Those that he had taken a fancy to would naturally not escape his grasp. During this period of time, he was worried that he would be bored. He did not expect that such a good thing would come to the outer hall. Naturally, he would not want to miss this opportunity. Looking at the intense excitement that flashed across Duan Huali's face, Peng Kairui already knew what he was thinking. He had been with Duan Huali for so long, so he could not be more familiar with the former style. This woman's appearance is indeed outstanding. Moreover, her temperament is not something that ordinary people can compare to. Compared to your previous ones, she is indeed the most outstanding one. Not to mention you, I'm afraid that no one can ignore her. Hearing this, Duan Huali glanced at Peng Kairui indifferently and said, You have an idea too? His cold voice revealed some coldness and displeasure, but also contained some warning. Peng Kairui quickly waved his hand and said, I don't mean that. I just think that the woman beside him is very good. Hearing this, Duan Huali glanced at Shangguan Yingying, who was beside Bailey Hongzhuang, and a smile appeared in his eyes. It seems that we have the same idea. Peng Kairui revealed a meaningful smile. Isn't this good? Recently, I've been staying in this training ground and facing these skeletons. It's really boring. It's just that, I can relax when I go back this time. Duan Huali and Peng Kairui looked at each other. Both of them smiled faintly, knowing what was going on. Huali, Peng Yingying's his. Peng Kairui looked at Duan Huali curiously. Logically speaking, with your position in the inner hall, this shouldn't happen. Duan Huali shrugged. These are just outer hall disciples who accidentally came to the wrong place. That's why they're here. It's normal that they don't know about my influence in the inner hall. When they return to the outer hall, they just need to ask around for my name, and they'll know how wrong their attitude is. Chapter 35:13. Looking at Duan Huali's confident look, Peng Kairui nodded and said, That's right. When they know your name, maybe you don't need to do anything and she will come to you directly. Haha. Duan Huali laughed heartily. That's not necessarily the case. According to my judgment, this woman is probably a proud and arrogant person. After all, with such an outstanding appearance, there must be a lot of suitors. I'm afraid it won't be so easy to get her. Oh. Peng Kairui raised his eyebrows. Don't you have enough confidence in yourself? Duan Huali raised a finger and shook it, saying, Of course I have enough confidence in myself. She will definitely become my woman. It's just that the process will be more troublesome than before. Speaking of which, I like such challenging things. If it's so easy to get, I always feel that it's a little lacking in charm. Hearing this, Peng Kairui smiled. You really are a master of love. Haha, this kind of thing is not complicated. When they need our help, all these problems will naturally be solved. Duan Huali raised his eyebrows and smiled with some pride. What do you mean? Peng Kairui looked at Duan Huali with slight confusion. He didn't understand what Duan Huali meant. It's very simple. Duan Huali smiled proudly. If they don't have any trouble, then we will create some trouble for them. As long as they can't solve it, it's naturally time for us to show up. However, they have just arrived at Penglai Palace and have already been framed. From this situation, I'm afraid that we don't need to create much trouble. They have already fallen into the vortex. Peng Kairui gave Duan Huali a thumbs up. It's really a good method. It seems that you have already thought everything through. This woman is destined to be yours. Of course. Duan Huali nodded without any modesty. His face was full of confidence. Over the years, which woman that I've taken a fancy to has been able to escape from my grasp? Peng Kairue thought carefully for a moment and then nodded in agreement. That's true. Among the outstanding figures in the inner palace, Duan Huali is the number one. That's not a bad name. Master, look at that smug look on Duan Huali's face. Just by looking at him, I can tell that he's up to no good. There's a wretched look on his face. Xiao He looked at Duan Huali in the distance, her eyes filled with disgust. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang faintly glanced at Duan Huali. Indeed, she discovered that Duan Huali's face revealed a hint of a conspiracy. She frowned slightly. Let him be. Whether they were on Penglai Island or after joining Penglai Palace, these troubles were inevitable. They had already encountered a lot of trouble on Penglai Island. After coming to Penglai Palace, they did not find a safe haven. Instead, they had entered a bigger stage of competition. Therefore, she had long been prepared to fight. No matter what kind of trouble they would encounter next, she would deal with it calmly. Di Beichen and the other two did not say much. They had already seen that Duan Huali was not a good person. They only hoped that Duan Huali would not trouble them. Otherwise, they could only teach Duan Huali a lesson. Chapter 35:14. Night slowly fell. When the night once again shrouded the earth, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in the cave couldn't help but show vigilant looks. Last night's incident had really left them with lingering fear. If there was another wave today, it would really be a big problem. When Duan Huali and the others saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, almost everyone showed the same vigilant look, and a strange light appeared in their eyes. All along, although Ren Ziheng and the others had emphasized to them that a big battle had happened last night, none of them took it to heart. They only thought that they were deliberately exaggerating to show off their achievements. However, the emotions that Ren Ziheng and the others were showing now really didn't seem to be faked, which made them a little curious. Duan Huali, do you think that what they said before was true? Otherwise, why would they be so vigilant? It doesn't seem normal. Peng Kairue frowned and said. Although he didn't usually have much contact with Ren Ziheng and the others, he had a certain understanding of Ren Ziheng. This reaction didn't seem to be groundless. Hearing this, Duan Huali pondered for a moment before shaking his head with a chuckle. Aren't you being a little too gullible? Forget about the both of us, even others wouldn't believe such a thing if I were to tell them. You're right. Peng Kairue nodded thoughtfully, it's just that their reaction is really a little strange. If they don't act like this, how can they scare us? Duan Huali shrugged indifferently. Recently, Ren Ziheng's achievements haven't been very good. Maybe they want to use this method to emphasize their achievements. After all, people always want to save face. When these words came out, Peng Kairue couldn't help but laugh. That's true. Recently, he has often been assigned the task of protecting injured disciples. This is really a little, it's good that you know. Duan Huali chuckled. Although Duan Huali and Peng Kairue's conversation wasn't loud, in such a quiet environment, it was still inevitable that it was heard by others. When Ren Zimei heard the discussion between the two of them, she couldn't help but feel angry. This was a slap to their faces. Duan Huali and Peng Kairue have gone too far. How could they speak to such an extent? Ren Zimei's face was filled with indignation. She was already disgusted with Duan Huali. This guy had some feelings for her before, but after being rejected by her, she was even ridiculed by this guy several times, which made her feel even more hateful. Ren Ziheng's expression was similarly ugly. There was a faint trace of anger in the depths of his eyes, but he did not show it on his face. He only patted Ren Zimei's shoulder and said, "Forget it. It's not like you don't know what kind of person he is. If we really get angry with him, the ones who will be in trouble will be us. He can say whatever he wants. In any case, I'm doing the right thing, so there's no need to worry. I just don't like this guy. He always thinks he's so great, but in fact, just looking at his face makes me want to vomit. Ren Zimei's face was still full of displeasure. If it weren't for Duan Huali's strength, she would have already fallen out with Duan Huali, but now she had to pretend to be very good on the surface. Chapter 35:15. It's best to let them not believe it. Anyway, when we return to the inner hall, we will definitely report this matter. At that time, the mentors will also confirm whether what we said is true or not. The more they don't believe it, the more they will lose face when the mentors confirm the result. Chu Jinfeng's eyes flashed with a sinister light. He was also full of disgust for Duan Huali. After all, he had always had feelings for Ren Zimei, and Duan Huali's previous humiliation of Ren Zimei was also something he couldn't stand. If it weren't for the fact that there was a certain gap between his strength and Duan Huali's, he would have already taught this self-righteous guy a lesson. Listening to Chu Jinfeng's words, Ren Zimei's face looked better. She nodded and said, "You are right. Let this guy be self-righteous. When the time comes, he will be the one who will be slapped in the face. Yes, why should we care about what he thinks?" A smile appeared on Ren Ziheng's face again. I actually hope that they will witness all this with their own eyes. When that time comes, their faces will definitely be very interesting. That night, Ren Ziheng's people had very complicated feelings. On one hand, they hoped that they could pass the night peacefully and return to Pinglai Palace tomorrow. On the other hand, they wanted to see Duan Huali's shocked expression, so they hoped that the skeleton army would appear again. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three maintained the appearance of cultivation. After last night's incident, they understood that no matter what, they had to maintain their best state at all times. Once the skeleton army appeared, they would be able to deal with it in their best state. I hope that these skeletons will not appear again tonight. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for us to deal with another wave. Sheng Guanying's face was full of prayer. Last night's experience was undoubtedly a nightmare. If they had not cooperated quite well, it was very likely that they would have been completely wiped out. She also understood why the number of inner hall disciples had always been maintained at a certain level. It was really too dangerous here. If they didn't have a certain level of strength, they would only lose their lives. Although there are more people in the team today, but in my opinion, with the arrogance of Duan Huali and the others, if a skeleton army really appears, I'm afraid it won't be easy to cooperate with them. Maybe it will be more of a hindrance. Wen Ziren sighed and shook his head. Sometimes, people with strength may not be able to help much because they tend to think highly of themselves and are unwilling to listen to the opinions of others. In his opinion, Duan Huali was clearly such a person. Ziren, your eye for people has become more and more accurate recently. Di Beichen gave Ziren a thumbs up. His handsome face curled up into an evil and playful smile. Beichen, are you praising me or insulting me? Ziren raised his eyebrows. Why did he feel that Di Beichen's words didn't sound right? Di Beichen gave a low laugh. I'm praising you for your progress. Time passed by minute. Everyone was waiting quietly. No one knew what would happen in the next second. Bailey Hongzhuang also warned the surroundings. As long as there was a slight movement, she would definitely notice it at the first moment. Chapter 35:16. Hearing Bailey Hongzhuang's words, Di Beichen nodded and said, "Indeed, it's still calm at the moment. There are no signs of the skeleton army appearing. It would be best if the skeleton army doesn't appear tonight. We can return to the outer hall tomorrow." Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled into a relaxed smile. Li Shengkai had tricked them to come here in order to make them lose their lives. If they returned alive, Li Shengkai and the others would be very surprised. After returning to the outer hall tomorrow, the first thing I'll do is to find Li Shengkai. I treated him as a friend, but I didn't expect him to trick us like this behind our backs. If it weren't for our good luck, we would have died here yesterday. Sheng Guanying's eyes flickered with anger. This time, they had been tricked too miserably. Just thinking about last night's experience made her feel a lingering fear. If they had been just a little bit slower, they would have been left here forever. Looking at Shangguan Yingying's fiery appearance, Ziren said, "Okay, as long as we go back tomorrow, I'll accompany you to find Li Xingkai. I hope that guy is in the outer hall." The last time they came here to train, Li Xingkai and the others were obviously going to the training ground. They were not sure if Li Xingkai had returned after such a long time. If that guy is not in the outer hall, then I'll wait for him to appear. Unless he dies in the training ground, this matter will never end. Shangguan Yingying clenched her fists. She now felt that Li Xingkai was the most hateful person. If he had been an enemy from the beginning, it would have been fine. But he had deceived them as a friend, which was the most unbearable thing. Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen had no objections to this. This matter had to be resolved sooner or later. From the moment Li Xingkai chose to deceive them, they had already stood on the opposite side. The other party wanted to kill them, so how could they be polite? As time passed, Ren Ziheng and the others maintained a tense state. No one knew what would happen in the next moment. Compared to the nervousness of Ren Ziheng's group, Duan Huali's group appeared much calmer. Instead, they looked at Ren Ziheng's group as if they were looking at a joke. They didn't believe that so many skeletons would appear. The cave was very quiet. Everyone was looking around. If there was even the slightest movement, they would be the first to notice it. However, even as the sky gradually brightened, the wind and waves were still calm, and there were no fluctuations. Seeing the sky brighten, everyone couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Looks like we're in luck tonight. The skeletons won't appear again. Ren Ziheng heaved a sigh of relief. He really didn't want to experience what happened last night again. It would have been fine if they were fully prepared. However, their current situation was simply too difficult to deal with. A relaxed smile appeared on Ren Zimei's face. "We're finally able to return safely. This time, it was a close call." As she spoke, Ren Zimei looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. "Fortunately, the 4 of you came here by accident. Otherwise, I'm afraid we wouldn't have been able to survive last night." As soon as she said this, Ren Ziheng and the others also looked at Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4. They also felt lucky. Chapter 35:17. Senior Sister Ren, you're praising us too much. We were just lucky. The corners of Bailey Hongzhuang's lips slowly curled into a faint smile. Her elegant and refined features looked even more otherworldly and elegant. Although they had stumbled into this place by accident, it was still a great harvest for them. Ren Zimei waved her hand and smiled, "I'm telling the truth." Seeing how everyone was praising Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, Duan Huali and Peng Kairui could not help but look at each other. A look of disdain flashed across their eyes. "Ren Zimei, aren't you exaggerating a little too much?" Peng Kairui slowly said, "They're just 4 new disciples from the outer palace. Don't tell me that they could have turned the tide in the disaster that you're talking about." The moment these words were spoken, the cultivators behind Duan Huali all laughed out loud. Until now, they still felt as if they were watching a show. Ren Zimei and the others' praise for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had far exceeded their expectations. No matter how they looked at it, it was impossible. Hearing Peng Kairui's mocking words, Ren Zimei could not help but speak up, "They did turn the tide in yesterday's matter. If it weren't for them, we would have been completely annihilated." "Hee hee." Peng Kairui chuckled. The space between his brows was filled with disbelief. "They're just disciples from the outer palace. How capable could they be?" "Ren Zimei, I think that you and your brother have been busy helping the injured recently. That's why your fighting strength and eyesight have deteriorated." Peng Kairui clicked his tongue and shook his head. His disdain could not be more obvious. A look of annoyance surfaced on Ren Zimei's face. "It's your business if you don't believe me. Why do you have to slander my brother and me? What you're saying is wrong. How can this be considered as slander? I'm just telling the truth. Penkairoe chuckled and ignored Renzime's anger. Looking at Penkairoe's arrogant appearance, Renzime was even more furious. Her and Ren Ziheng's recent development in the inner hall was indeed inferior to Duan Huali and Penkairoe, but no one could tolerate being ridiculed by them for no reason. Penkairoe, I know you've been riding the crest of success recently, but everyone has their downfall. I advise you not to be too arrogant now. After all, it's better to leave a way out for others in the future. At this moment, Ren Ziheng spoke slowly, and his words were filled with warning. He didn't want to clash with Duan Huali and the others because he wanted to avoid some conflicts. However, if the other party really provoked him, he didn't lack the courage to fight back. Seeing that even Ren Ziheng was angered, Penkairoe restrained himself slightly and said, I was just joking. Aren't you two siblings going too far? Humph. Renzime snorted coldly. The coldness on her face was still obvious. She insinuated, some people think too highly of themselves. They think they're the best and look down on the achievements of others. One day, they'll realize that they're the frogs at the bottom of the well. As soon as these words were spoken, Penkairoe's face turned ugly. There was a faint trace of anger. Just as he was about to explode, Duan Huali suddenly reached out and stopped him. Chapter 35:18. Duan Huali's face was brimming with a smile that was like a spring breeze, showing his grace and magnanimity. However, whether it was Ren Ziheng and the others, or Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, none of them felt that Duan Huali's words were from the bottom of his heart. After all, Penkairoe and Duan Huali's relationship was extremely good. The two of them were obviously the same. They were all the same, so how could Duan Huali and Penkairoe have completely different thoughts? After hearing what you said, I'm also very interested in the 4 outer hall disciples. If there's a chance, I'll definitely see how powerful they are. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others' gazes fell on Duan Huali. It was clearly a very ordinary sentence, but to them, the meaning behind it was somewhat unusual. After Duan Huali finished speaking, he looked at Bailey Hongzhuang with a deep meaning. He didn't know why Renzime would praise Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3, but he believed that Renzime must have her reasons. Since he had already taken a fancy to Bailey Hongzhuang would be his woman in the future. If he had some skills, it would undoubtedly be best. Feeling Duan Huali's gaze, Bailey Hongzhuang had a somewhat ominous premonition in her heart. This Duan Huali was probably really troublesome. Duan Huali, aren't you too good-natured? You believe everything they say. Penkairoe sighed and shook his head. A trace of a playful smile appeared on his face. In my opinion, the 4 deep pits that they spoke of are simply impossible. Wasn't everything fine last night? Penkairoe's gaze swept over Ren Ziheng and the others. You must have seen that we haven't seen each other for a long time, so you deliberately made up a story for us to hear, right? That's not necessarily true. I know Ren Zixing and the others' character. I presume they wouldn't fabricate such a ridiculous story to deceive us. Duan Huali chuckled. Although Duan Huali's words sounded like he was standing on Ren Ziheng's side, one could hear the sarcasm in his words if one listened carefully. The crowd was not stupid. Just by looking at Duan Huali and Penkairoe's expressions, they understood that they were singing the same tune and deliberately ridiculing them. Hearing the sarcasm in Duan Huali's tone, Ren Ziheng did not try to defend himself. Recently, I have a new hobby, which is to make up stories. I especially like to make up stories that no one believes. He knew very well that Duan Huali wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to ridicule him. Rather than that, he might as well frankly say that he was making up a story, which would save him some trouble. Seeing that Ren Ziheng had given up and admitted that he was making up a story, Duan Huali was a little surprised. However, he quickly reacted and a smile appeared on his face again. He said, "Your story is indeed very well made up. If I wasn't careful, I would have thought that you were telling the truth. Thank you for the compliment," Ren Ziheng said indifferently. Bailey Hongzhuang looked at the surging waves between Ren Ziheng and Duan Huali and understood that the two of them were not on good terms. Moreover, it seemed that they had been on bad terms for a long time. However, the conflict in the inner hall did not have much to do with them for the time being. Naturally, there was no need for them to say anything. In my opinion, with Duan Huali's character, I'm afraid that he has many enemies in the inner hall. Ziren said slowly. Chapter 35:19. As long as he doesn't provoke us, we'll just pretend that we didn't see anything. Di Beichen looked indifferent, but he suddenly smiled and said, "But according to my judgment, this guy probably doesn't have good eyesight, so I'm afraid we'll have some trouble in the future." As soon as these words came out, Bailey Hongzhuang's face also showed a tacit smile. "I heard that his influence in the inner hall is not small. I'm afraid it'll be a challenge for us. Wouldn't life be boring if there were no challenges?" Di Beichen glanced at Bailey Hongzhuang, and then said, "My wife and I should both like challenges, right? Husband sings, wife follows." Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up, her eyes shining brightly. Seeing that Di Beichen and Bailey Hongzhuang had already reached this tacit understanding, when Ziren also gave a thumbs up and sighed, "This show of affection, I give full marks." Shengguan Yingying chuckled. In the past, she rarely encountered difficulties and troubles. However, ever since she came to Penglai Island with Wen Ziren and the others, she discovered that there were troubles and difficulties. She had never left them. Now she had long been used to it. If there were no troubles coming to her from time to time, she was afraid that she would feel a little bored. As the sky gradually brightened, everyone's mood improved. Staying in this place of experience, everyone was always a little nervous. A little carelessness could cause them to lose their lives, so they were always in a state of depression. After returning to Penglai Palace, everyone could relax. At least they didn't have to worry about the possibility of losing their lives at any time. "The sky is already bright, let's go to the transmission array." A relaxed smile appeared on Ren Zimei's face. Although the appearance of Duan Huali and others affected her mood, at this moment, she was still very happy. Chu Jinfeng nodded, "Okay, after we go back, we can also have a good rest. After I choose a place, I'll treat you to a meal." Listening to Chu Jinfeng's words, Ren Zimei glanced at him. Originally, she didn't like this guy, but since the appearance of Duan Huali and Peng Kairue, these two annoying guys, she felt that Chu Jinfeng was much more pleasing to the eye. "Okay." Ren Zimei responded faintly. The smile in Chu Jinfeng's eyes widened a little. According to the result of his discussion with Ziren before, if he could perform well this time, the possibility of winning the beauty's heart. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others, one after another, they all walked in the direction of the transmission array. Duan Huali also knew that his relationship with Ren Ziheng wasn't harmonious, so the two of them maintained a certain distance when traveling together. However, in the process of walking, Bailey Hongzhuang found that Duan Huali had been walking not far from her, and his eyes fell on her from time to time, full of a bit of flirting. Duan Huali had been watching Bailey Hongzhuang. Today, when he took a closer look, he only felt that Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance was more outstanding, and her temperament could be said to be extraordinary. At a glance, he knew that she was not an ordinary woman, and she was much better than the women he had pursued before. For a time, he actually felt a little serious in his heart. Chapter 35:20. Noticing Duan Huali's invasive gaze, Di Beichen directly put his hand on Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder. At the same time, he glanced indifferently at Duan Huali, his eyes full of warning. Di Beichen's woman was not to be touched by anyone else. Even though Duan Huali's strength was not bad and he had a certain status in the inner hall, to him, this was not a deterrent at all. Anyone who had any ideas about Di Baichen's woman would definitely not have a good ending. Seeing Di Baichen's sudden action, Duan Huali could not help but be stunned. His eyes were full of astonishment. Although he already felt that Di Baichen was the backbone of Bailey Hongzhuang's team of 4, he did not know that Di Baichen and Bailey Hongzhuang had such a relationship. It was really beyond his expectations. Taking a closer look, he found that Bailey Hongzhuang was also obediently leaning on Di Baichen. The two of them looked like a perfect match. He could not help but frown. This gave him a very unpleasant feeling. Peng Kairoe also noticed this scene. He was secretly surprised. He did not expect that the woman Duan Huali had his eyes on this time was already taken. Duan Huali, it seems that your situation is not very good this time. Peng Kairoe slowly said. Hearing this, Duan Huali's face turned cold. He said, so what? As long as it is a woman that I, Duan Huali, like, she will be mine sooner or later. Seeing that Duan Huali was still so determined after knowing the situation, Peng Kairoe's eyes could not help but change a little. He then smiled and said, perhaps this kind of woman is more charming. He actually dared to provoke me. I will definitely let him know the price of provoking me. Duan Huali's face was gloomy. As a man, how could he not see the warning in Di Baichen's eyes? Di Baichen was obviously just an ordinary outer hall disciple, but he dared to provoke him. Was this not completely disregarding his dignity? If he did not teach him a lesson, how could he show his status? Duan Huali secretly thought in his heart. After returning, he must teach Di Baichen a lesson so that he would know that Penglai Palace was not like the outside. He could do whatever he wanted just because he had some strength. After all, outer hall disciples were just a bunch of trash in front of inner hall disciples. However, while Duan Huali was very angry, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were completely unaware. This was because they were already thinking about how they would settle the score with Li Shengkai when they returned. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang and the others entered the training grounds of the inner hall disciples, Li Shengkai had been worried about this matter. Although the rest of the team firmly believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would not be able to return alive, Li Shengkai was still on tenterhooks. After all, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's performance in the outer hall was simply too frightening. Moreover, they must have their reasons for being so highly regarded by Lord Long. If they were lucky and did not fall in the training grounds of the inner hall disciples this time, he would be in trouble if they returned alive. Just thinking about this possibility made him unable to eat or sleep in peace. Previously, there was no conflict between him and Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. On the contrary, they could even be considered friends. However, after this incident, he had completely offended them. Chapter 35-21. Li Shengkai, what are you thinking about? Why do you look so pale? Qing Juanhe couldn't help but ask when he noticed Li Shengkai's complicated expression. Li Shengkai turned around, looked at Qing Juanhe, and said, I keep having the feeling that what we did last time wasn't right. Today is the day the teleportation formation for the inner hall disciples will be activated. If they come back alive, what should we do? As the time drew closer, the anxiety in his heart grew stronger. If Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 really returned alive, they would be in deep trouble. Qing Juanhe couldn't help but frown when he heard Li Shengkai's words. A hint of disdain appeared in his eyes. He said, Li Shengkai, aren't you a little too cowardly? You're actually still worried about this even now. Have you ever seen an outer palace disciple return alive after entering an inner palace disciple's training ground? That's simply impossible. Instead of spending your energy worrying about this, why don't you think about how to raise your own cultivation and not drag down the team's results? Li Shengkai felt rather helpless when he heard the displeasure and impatience in Qing Juanhe's words. In fact, he understood that Qing Juanhe was telling the truth. However, for some reason, he couldn't help but feel worried. In his opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 weren't ordinary people. After all, what they did before wasn't something an ordinary person could do. Even so, what should we do if they return alive? Li Shengkai couldn't help but ask. He knew that he was indeed very useless. In the eyes of Qing Juanhe and the others, he had become a coward. However, he really had an inexplicable premonition. It's impossible for them to return alive. Qing Juanhe's voice was slightly cold. Ever since they tricked Bailey Hongzhuang's group into the Inner Palace Disciples training ground, Li Shengkai had always looked like his soul had left his body. When they were training, he made mistakes time and time again. If it weren't for their help, Li Shengkai would have lost his life long ago. He was already very dissatisfied with this. He did not expect that after returning to the outer hall, Li Shengkai would still be on tenterhooks about this matter. This made him feel even more disdainful. Such a teammate was too cowardly. After noticing the conversation between Li Shengkai and Qing Juanhe, the other cultivators in the team could not help but speak up to advise them. Li Shengkai, aren't you worrying too much? If they can really come back alive, then they're really lucky. Don't worry, they won't come back. Even if they do come back, you won't be the only one facing this disaster. Why are you so worried? I see that you've been distracted recently because you're worried about this matter. Why don't you go back and have a good rest? You'll be completely relieved tomorrow. Smiles appeared on everyone's faces. In their opinion, Li Shengkai had really become a coward. Although the commotion caused by Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 in the outer hall was a little frightening, it was a little too cowardly to be under their shadow. Moreover, in their opinion, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 had already become souls in the ground. Chapter 35-22. All along, he was the only one who was worried about this matter. Everyone in the team seemed to have believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were dead. However, he could not make everyone understand the premonition in his heart, so he could only be regarded as a coward by everyone. In fact, if he could, he really did not want to be involved in the matter of deceiving Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. However, things had already developed to this point. Although he regretted it a little, there was nothing he could do. Sigh, since you all don't believe it, perhaps I'm really overthinking it. Li Shengkai sighed. A strong sense of helplessness appeared on his face. He really hoped that this matter would be as everyone thought and that there would not be any twists and turns. Qing Juanhe glanced at Li Shengkai coldly. His eyes were filled with a hint of warning. It's your own business to be worried, but if you dare to leak a word about this matter, you'll have to bear the consequences. Qing Juanhe also had a certain amount of misgivings about the matter of setting up Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 behind their backs. No matter what, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were people that Master Long valued. Master Long had previously ordered them not to take revenge for the previous matter. If Master Long found out about this matter, it would be extremely detrimental to their future development. However, as long as Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 died quietly and they kept their mouths shut, they believed that no one else would know about this news. As soon as these words came out, the other cultivators also looked at Li Shengkai nervously. They were confident enough, but they could not help but worry about Li Shengkai's panic. Sensing everyone's gaze, Li Shengkai quickly nodded and said, "Don't worry, I will definitely not leak this matter." Qing Juanhe carefully observed Li Shengkai's expression before slowly retracting his gaze. If Li Shengkai was still the same as before, then he did not mind getting rid of him. At least, he could avoid more trouble. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the others returned through the teleportation formation, they sighed in their hearts when they saw the 2 familiar teleportation formations. When they left previously, who would have thought that they would experience such a scene after entering the teleportation formation? Fortunately, they returned safely in the end, which really made them heave a sigh of relief. I'm finally back. A smile appeared on Shangguan Yingying's face. Standing there, the air seemed to be less stuffy, and she felt relaxed. The faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two also showed a smile, at least it was much safer here. Junior brother D, we need to return to the inner hall to hand in the mission. We won't stay with you any longer. Ren Ziheng looked at Di Beichen and the other three and said slowly. Di Beichen nodded. Alright, you guys can go ahead and do your work. Compared to the lax training of the outer palace disciples, every time the inner palace disciples headed to the training grounds, they would receive some missions and must complete the handover. The rules of the inner palace were much stricter than the outer palace disciples. After we're done with our business, we'll come and have a drink with you when we're free, Chu Jinfeng said with a smile. No problem. Wen Ziren laughed heartily. He lowered his voice and said to Chu Jinfeng, when you're done with your business, you must find me for a drink. Chapter 35-23. After Ren Ziheng and the others left, Duan Huali stopped in front of Bailey Hongzhuang. His handsome face was filled with a kind smile. Junior sister Bailey, if you can't handle the matter, you can come to the inner hall to find me. Thank you for your kindness, but I don't think it's necessary. Bailey Hongzhuang said faintly. This Duan Huali was obviously up to no good. She did not intend to give him the slightest chance to get close to her. Seeing that Bailey Hongzhuang still bluntly refused, Duan Huali raised his eyebrows and did not say anything more. The smile on his face was still there. Junior sister Bailey, you don't have to be in a hurry to refuse. There will be a time when you need my help in the future. At this time, Di Beichen stepped forward and separated Bailey Hongzhuang and Duan Huali. He said, Senior brother Duan, don't worry. I will naturally deal with my wife's matter. I don't need anyone else to intervene. His handsome face was filled with a faint confidence. Di Beichen, who was already outstanding, looked even more magnificent and dazzling at this moment. Standing in front of Duan Huali, his aura was even stronger than Duan Huali's. Seeing this scene, a hint of surprise appeared in the eyes of the surrounding people. It should be known that Duan Huali was also an influential figure in the inner hall. Whether it was his temperament or his aura, he was very outstanding. They did not expect that he would be suppressed by an outer hall disciple. It was really surprising. Duan Huali naturally also noticed this. He could not help but lose the smile on his face. He said coldly, Junior brother D is too confident. There are many talents in this Penglai palace. Even if you have some ability, you should not be so arrogant. If this problem can't be solved in the end, it will be a joke. Hearing this, Di Beichen smiled faintly. Senior brother Duan, you're worrying too much. I know you're kind-hearted, but I didn't expect you to be so concerned about someone else's wife. This is a little unnecessary. Duan Huali had repeatedly fawned over Bailey Hongzhuang, and Di Beichen had long been dissatisfied. Now that Duan Huali had done such a thing, Di Beichen naturally wouldn't be polite anymore. Following Di Beichen's words, the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. There were quite a few cultivators near the teleportation array. When they heard Di Beichen's words, they looked at Duan Huali with a strange expression. I've long heard that Duan Huali of the inner hall is a womanizer. I didn't expect him to have designs on someone else's wife. Isn't it a bit too low? Bailey Hongzhuang's appearance is the most outstanding. It's not surprising that Duan Huali has such thoughts. However, it's a bit too much to flirt with Di Beichen's wife so blatantly in front of him. Now there's a good show to watch. These two people are tit for tat. I don't know how Duan Huali will solve it. More and more cultivators gathered around, and their eyes were fixed on Di Beichen and Duan Huali, two very outstanding men. In terms of appearance, Duan Huali naturally lost to Di Beichen. However, Duan Huali's status in Penglai Palace was higher than Di Beichen's, so everyone was not sure who the final winner would be. Xiren and Shengguan Yingying looked at each other, and a faint smile appeared in their eyes. Beichen is angry. Xiren and Di Beichen had been together for so many years, so he knew Di Beichen's character very well. Just by looking at the subtle expressions on Di Beichen's face, he could judge Di Beichen's real thoughts. Chapter 35-24. Junior D, what do you mean by that? Duan Huali's tone was cold, and his words were full of warning. He was indeed interested in Bailey Hongzhuang, but at the moment, when Di Beichen said it so bluntly, his face was obviously not as good as his. Don't tell me you still don't understand what I mean. What I said couldn't be any more obvious. A cold light appeared on Di Beichen's handsome face. He glanced at Duan Huali indifferently, and his eyes were vaguely filled with disgust. In the next second, he ignored Duan Huali, put his arm around Bailey Hongzhuang's shoulder, and walked directly in the direction of the outer hall. Bailey Hongzhuang didn't say anything either, and just left with Di Beichen. At a time like this, her man would naturally do whatever he wanted. Seeing this scene, Duan Huali stood in the same place, dumbfounded. He looked at the backs of the two people leaving, and his face was as gloomy as the bottom of a pot. Ren Ziheng and the others hadn't gone far when they discovered the conflict between Di Beichen and Duan Huali. At this moment, after seeing Di Beichen's domineering side, a trace of surprise and shock emerged in everyone's hearts. I didn't expect Di Beichen to be so domineering. He actually directly started a fight with Duan Huali. Chu Jinfeng sighed. Through his previous interaction with Di Beichen, he only felt that Di Beichen was a man who was like a spring breeze. Whether it was the way he spoke or the way he acted, he was very gentle. There was a big difference between his current domineering and awe-inspiring appearance. Duan Huali is really too much. Di Beichen has already revealed his identity, but he still harassed Bailey Hongzhuang time and time again. No matter who it was, I'm afraid they would be angry by now, Ren Zimei said. Ren Ziheng shook his head and said, that's not necessarily true. If an ordinary person knew Duan Huali's position in the inner hall, they probably wouldn't dare to speak up directly. However, Di Beichen clearly knew, and yet he still dared to do so. At least this proves that he's not an ordinary person. Junior D isn't the coward you think he is. This action is not out of my expectations at all, Jing Tianlang said. Chu Jinfeng sighed, however, things have already reached this point. It's not easy to end it, Ren Zimei nodded, don't be fooled by Duan Huali's usual generous appearance. In fact, he's a narrow-minded man. Now that Di Beichen has offended him so badly, he will definitely think of ways to teach Di Beichen a lesson. I'm afraid they won't have an easy time in the future. Since Junior D has done this, he must have thought of the consequences. Don't worry too much. Ren Ziheng said slowly, no matter what, this is still the Penglai Palace. Even if Duan Huali wants to do something, he can't do it too blatantly. I still have to find a chance to remind Junior D and the others. If they don't take precautions, once they're tricked, it's really, did you see that? Just now, Duan Huali's face had already turned into the color of pig liver. Just thinking about it makes me laugh. Xiao He held her stomach and giggled. Di Beichen's words just now really vented her anger. Chapter 35-25. Bailey Hongzhuang turned to look at Di Beichen beside her. His handsome face exuded a charming charm as always. His slightly pursed lips revealed a cold arc. Just by looking at Di Beichen's expression, she knew that Di Beichen was really angry. Di Beichen wouldn't care about ordinary things. However, as long as it was related to Bailey Hongzhuang, it was completely different. Perhaps other people would be thinking about how to solve the problem after offending Duan Huali. However, Bailey Hongzhuang only felt a sweet feeling in her heart. Even though she already knew how important she was in Di Baiqian's heart, she still felt very sweet when she saw how much Di Baiqian cared about her. As for Duan Huali, Bailey Hongzhuang had long forgotten about him. In the next moment, Bailey Hongzhuang directly held Di Baiqian's hand. Their fingers interlocked, and a faint smile appeared on her pretty face. Di Baiqian was originally in a bad mood. However, after Bailey Hongzhuang's small action, the cold arc on his lips relaxed slightly and faintly rose. Duan Huali's face was already extremely ugly. The surrounding people's discussions and strange gazes made him feel even more embarrassed. Thinking about how he, Duan Huali, was famous in the inner hall, there were very few people who dared to embarrass him like this. He only felt an indescribable anger rising from his bones. He couldn't wait to tear Di Baiqian into pieces. Peng Kairui looked at Duan Huali standing in the same place. He couldn't help but walk to his side and say, "It's getting late. Let's go back." It didn't feel good to continue to stay here and be looked at by everyone. Although the target of everyone's attention was Duan Huali, Peng Kairui, as his teammate, was also very embarrassed. As Peng Kairui's voice fell, Duan Huali recovered from his anger. He looked at the surrounding people who were looking at him. The anger on his face couldn't help but become more vigorous. "What are you looking at? Get out of here." Hearing Duan Huali's furious roar, the surrounding cultivators were all stunned. Immediately, they didn't dare to listen and scattered in all directions. With Duan Huali's position in the inner hall, they didn't dare to easily offend him. After all, with the former's means, it was undoubtedly easy to deal with them. However, Duan Huali's angry expression made them even more sure that what Di Baiqian said before was true. Otherwise, Duan Huali wouldn't have been so angry. After the surrounding cultivators left one after another, Duan Huali then turned to look at Peng Kairui and the others. Peng Kairui and the others also restrained their expressions. They didn't want to anger Duan Huali at this time. "Let's go," Duan Huali said coldly. He needed to go back and think of a way to deal with Di Baiqian. Seeing this, everyone heaved a sigh of relief and immediately followed Duan Huali to the inner hall. They had stayed in the training ground for such a long time and were already very tired. Now, they really wanted to go back and have a good rest to recover their energy. After Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three returned to the outer hall, many cultivators' eyes fell on them. Speaking of which, although they had just arrived in the outer hall, they were indeed influential figures in the outer hall. Chapter 35-26. Look, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three are back. Recently, I haven't seen any traces of them, nor have they appeared in the training grounds. I was wondering where they had gone. I'm not sure. The four of them are always alone in the outer hall. Who knows what they've been up to? Numerous gazes fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, everyone could still see that they were travel-worn and somewhat disheveled. It was obvious that they had experienced something before. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three looked around the outer hall for a while, then immediately walked straight to Li Shinkai's residence. Speaking of which, it was all thanks to Li Shinkai telling them where he lived. Otherwise, they would have to put in a lot of effort to find Li Shinkai. I wonder if Li Shinkai has returned yet. Shengguan Yingying's eyes were filled with a thoughtful light. If he hasn't returned yet, we'll just wait here in the outer hall. We must wait for him to return. Seeing Shengguan Yingying's look of wanting to tear Li Shinkai into pieces, a smile appeared on the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two. Don't worry. As long as Li Shinkai is still alive, we'll definitely get our revenge. Bailey Hongzhuang said with a faint smile. Li Shinkai's actions were indeed overboard, but after experiencing the training grounds in the inner hall, she felt that this was a very good harvest. At least, Li Shinkai's scheme did not succeed. When Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three arrived at Li Shinkai's residence, they happened to see Li Shinkai and some others standing in front of the building. After listening carefully, they realized that Li Shinkai and the others were talking about the four of them. "I'm really sorry. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you." Di Beichen's voice slowly sounded. As Di Beichen's voice fell, Li Shinkai, Qing Juanhe, and the others who were talking could not help but be stunned. Just as they were wondering where the voice came from, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three menacingly approaching. Li Shinkai and the others could not help but be stunned when they saw them. They stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, and a look of disbelief quickly climbed onto their faces. "You! Why are you here?" Li Shinkai could not help but ask. "Why can't we be here?" Xiren's lips curled into a playful smile as he asked. Li Shinkai's face turned pale. What he was most worried about had happened. Qing Juanhe and the others froze in place, looking at Bailey Hongzhuang and the others standing in front of them in disbelief. The word "impossible" kept appearing in their minds. Impossible. How did you come back alive? Qing Juanhe's face was filled with disbelief. According to his judgment, as long as an outer hall disciple entered the training grounds of inner hall disciples, there was only a path to death. For so many years, there had never been such an accident. He had seen Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three enter the teleportation formation of the inner hall with his own eyes. How could they appear here alive? This was something that was simply impossible to happen. Qing Juanhe could not figure it out no matter how hard he thought about it. This possibility had never appeared in his mind before. Hearing Qing Juanhe's words, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's gazes fell on him. Chapter 35-27. Is it that hard to believe that we came back alive? The corners of Shangguan Yingying's lips curled into a cold smile as she looked at Qing Juanhe. If they didn't know much about Qing Juanhe before, then looking at Qing Juanhe's reaction now, they knew that Qing Juanhe was definitely a member of this conspiracy. In fact, it was very likely that he was the initiator of this conspiracy. After all, Qing Juanhe was the first to answer their question about the teleportation portal. This proved that Qing Juanhe was the first to plot against them. "Master, do we know this Qing Juanhe? Why would he plot against us behind our backs?" Xiao Hei's eyes flashed with confusion. From what he could remember, they did not have any interactions with Qing Juanhe. He should not have any reason to plot against them like this. Bailey Hongzhuang frowned. She also did not have any impression of Qing Juanhe. She was not sure why he would do this. Come to think of it, he is very likely one of the cultivators who went against us back then. Perhaps his cultivation level has decreased a lot, so he secretly hates us. If that's the case, this matter can be explained. Di Beichen slowly said into Bailey Hongzhuang's ear. Hearing this, Bailey Hongzhuang looked up and met Di Beichen's deep and wise eyes. She thought about it secretly and realized that Di Beichen's words made a lot of sense. There were too many cultivators who went against them back then. Even though many of them had fallen, there were still many left. She had some impression of many cultivators, but it was impossible for her to remember all of them. Therefore, it was normal for her to overlook some things. If Qing Juanhe was one of the cultivators, then the enmity between the two of them would not be ordinary. Why do we care so much about him? Shangguan Yingying was very calm. Anyway, we just need to know that he is our enemy. As for why he did this, it doesn't matter to us. As Shangguan Yingying's voice fell, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two nodded in unison. This was the truth. In any case, the enmity between them had already reached an irreconcilable level. It seemed that only when the other party paid a sufficient price would it be completely resolved. Qing Juanhe and the others glanced at each other, and they seemed as if they'd seen a ghost. According to their knowledge, there was no example of an outer palace disciple coming back alive after entering the training grounds of the inner palace disciples. What should we do now? Li Xingkai couldn't help but look at Qing Juanhe. Ever since Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three fought in the outer hall, he knew how powerful they were. He knew that his strength could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. As long as the four of them wanted to kill him, he would not be able to resist. Most importantly, he didn't want to die at all. Now, he regretted it to the extreme. If he had known that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others would be able to return alive, he would not have joined Qing Juanhe and the others in this conspiracy. Now, he was completely dragged into the water. When he thought about the terrifying combat power of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, he knew that even if everyone here joined forces, they would still not be a match for them. At the thought of this, Li Xingkai felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. Cold sweat began to form on his back. Chapter 35-28. It was not just Li Xingkai and Qing Juanhe. The other cultivators in the group were also pale. They could not understand how Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four could come back alive after entering such a dangerous place. Even though they were filled with regret, there was no medicine for regret at this moment. Everyone felt a chill run down their spines and their minds were in a mess. They did not know how to react. Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four is too strange. Previously, so many people went against them, but they didn't die. This time, they actually came out alive from the training ground of the inner palace disciples. I really don't know how they did it. A cultivator could not help but sigh. His words were filled with disbelief. He only felt that all the common sense that they originally understood had become illogical after encountering Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. It was clearly something that could not be broken, but it became an accident when they encountered them. I don't know. These four people are just too strange. I'm afraid we're one step behind. If we knew this would happen, we wouldn't have targeted them before. Now we're in big trouble. Everyone whispered. Their hearts were filled with annoyance and regret. At this moment, they were even more afraid. Li Xingkai, no matter what, we've known each other before. I didn't expect you to give us such a big gift. We'll have to return it to you properly. Ziren looked at Li Xingkai with a faint smile. Although the smile on his face was as gentle as a spring breeze, anyone could hear the cold murderous intent in his words. Li Xingkai's expression was extremely ugly. He really did not want to fight Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four head-on because he had no confidence in his own strength. He believed that any cultivator who had seen Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four in action would not have the confidence to fight them head-on because the four of them were completely abnormal. If Bailey Hongzhuang poisoned him, he would really want to cry but no tears would come out. Junior brother Wen, this matter. There might be a misunderstanding. Li Xingkai stammered. Misunderstanding? Ziren chuckled. I'd like to know what kind of misunderstanding it is. You wouldn't be trying to tell us that you've been in the outer palace for such a long time, yet you've even forgotten which teleportation formation to head to the training grounds of the outer palace disciples, right? Shengguan Yingying looked at Li Xingkai mockingly. She felt that what Li Xingkai said was a complete joke. He clearly remembered that when they came to report, Li Xingkai had clearly told them that he had been in the outer hall for a very long time, so he knew the matters of the outer hall very well. If he told them this now, no one would believe him. Li Xingkai was a little embarrassed. He only felt that his mind was blank. He wanted to cover up this matter, but he found that he couldn't find a reason to lie at all. In fact, if this was said, no one would believe it, let alone Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. For a moment, Li Xingkai and the others fell silent. They were constantly thinking about what to do. Qing Juanhe's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang's group of four. He hated the four of them to the bone. If it were not for them, his cultivation would not have dropped so much. Chapter 35-29. The appearance of Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 had already attracted a lot of attention. Now that they had a conflict with Li Xinkai's group, it naturally became the matter that everyone was most concerned about. What's going on? Why are Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 fighting with Li Xinkai's group again? The 4 of them are really stirring up trouble one after another. From what I heard from their conversation, it seems that Li Xinkai's group tricked Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 into going to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Now, Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 has come looking for them. No way. We've all heard about how dangerous the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples are. It's said that as long as an Outer Palace disciple goes there, they won't be able to come back alive. How did Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 do it? In that case, Li Xinkai's group is really ruthless. They want to kill Bailey Hongzhuang's group. If I came back alive, I would definitely come looking for trouble with them. It's normal. Didn't you see Qing Juanhe in the group? In my opinion, this is most likely Qing Juanhe's idea. His cultivation was originally close to the 8th level of the Purple Realm. Now, because of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison, he has fallen to the 6th level of the Purple Realm. It's said that there's not much hope for him to enter the Inner Palace, so it's not strange for him to do this. Bailey Hongzhuang's group, who didn't know much about the specific situation, understood the whole story after hearing the crowd's discussion. It turned out that Qing Juanhe's cultivation had regressed so much because of them. Bailey Hongzhuang raised her eyebrows and looked at Di Beichen, saying, "It seems that your analysis is completely correct." Di Beichen smiled faintly, "Of course. Junior brother Wen, it's indeed my fault in this matter. I apologize to you." Li Xingkai braced himself and said. He understood that it was humiliating to say such words, but it was nothing compared to losing his life. As soon as these words were spoken, Wen Ziren couldn't help but chuckle and say, "You almost took our lives, yet you're trying to brush this matter aside with a casual apology. Isn't it a little too easy?" The awkwardness on Li Xinkai's face deepened. Looking at Ziren's aggressive eyes, he didn't know how to respond. In fact, he knew very well that no matter what he said at this time, it would be useless. "I didn't think that you would be able to come back alive. It seems that your luck is really good." Qing Juanhe looked coldly at Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. He knew very well that there was no turning back. Since that was the case, he might as well admit it openly and honestly. Cowering would only be more embarrassing. "Good luck." Di Beichen smirked. If everyone knew what they had gone through, they wouldn't think that they were just lucky. Isn't that the case? Qing Juanhe sneered, "The heavens are really blind. They should have just let you die in the training ground of the Inner Hall disciples." As soon as Qing Juanhe finished speaking, the faces of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 turned cold. A strong murderous aura exploded from their bodies. Only ghosts knew what they had gone through, and it was all thanks to Qing Juanhe. Chapter 35-30. Shengguan Yingying found Qing Juanhe's anger very funny. Ever since they joined the Penglai Palace, they had always been in a defensive position and had never taken the initiative to attack others. However, everyone had never intended to let them go and had constantly coveted their things, resulting in such a result. However, Qing Juanhe was now pushing all the blame onto them. It was simply too laughable. Everyone knew that Shengguan Yingying was right, but Qing Juanhe did not take this matter to heart. In his opinion, the reason why his cultivation had become what it was today was all thanks to Bailey Hongzhuang. Therefore, this hatred must be blamed on Bailey Hongzhuang. "What do you want now?" Qing Juanhe's gaze fell on Bailey Hongzhuang and Di Beichen. His eyes flashed with a cold chill and a faint murderous intent, but more than that, there was still fear. Don't you know what we want? Di Beichen asked back. Hearing this, Qing Juanhe looked at Di Beichen in surprise and doubt. Many thoughts flashed through his mind in an instant. He still did not believe that Di Beichen and the other three would dare to take their lives here. I did plot against you behind your backs, but if you make a big deal out of this now, it will not end well for you or for us. Qin Juanhe looked at the expressions of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. This could be considered a personal grudge between them. Last time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others caused too much of a sensation in the outer hall. Although they were not punished later, they must have been warned by Master Long. If the four of them had just returned and caused a big conflict, it would be difficult for them to explain to Master Long. Therefore, he could only put his hope on this point. As long as they had some considerations, then there was still a chance for things to turn around. At least, as long as they did not take action now, he still had hope to find others to help. It was much better than only them dealing with it. Are you threatening us? Bailey Hongzhuang's cold gaze landed on Qing Juanhe's face. Her slightly raised lips revealed a hint of mockery and amusement, but more importantly, a hint of mockery. Qing Juanhe was slightly stunned by Bailey Hongzhuang's straightforwardness. Yes, his words did contain some threat, but now that Bailey Hongzhuang said it out loud, he felt that his threat seemed to have lessened. You should know that although the outer hall does not prevent conflicts between cultivators, what you did last time has already angered everyone. If you continue to do this now, it will not be beneficial to your future development in the Penglai Palace. Qing Juanhe continued. At this point, he could only use this method to make Bailey Hongzhuang and the others change their minds because he was not confident that he could defeat them. If that's the case, then I have to thank you for reminding us of this. Bailey Hongzhuang's lips curled up slightly, and the mockery in her eyes became more intense. What I said is the truth. If you don't believe me, you can ask the others. Qing Juanhe forced himself to say. However, in the next moment, Di Beichen had already kicked Qing Juanhe. Bang! Chapter 35-31. Do we look like people who are afraid of trouble? Di Beichen looked at Qing Juanhe coldly. Today, we're here to take your lives. Di Beichen's sudden kick stunned everyone present. No one expected him to make such a clean move without any scruples at all. Qing Juanhe stared blankly at Di Beichen, who was looking down at him from above. He couldn't come back to his senses for a while. His analysis was obviously not wrong at all. Logically speaking, any cultivator would hesitate in such a situation. However, Di Beichen was so decisive, which really exceeded his expectations. Di Beichen, you! Qing Juanhe shouted angrily as he quickly got up from the ground. Being kicked to the ground by the other party really made him lose face. You what? Xiren looked at Qing Juanhe coldly. You damn guys, just wait to die. From the moment they decided to take revenge, they had already made up their minds. As long as they were still alive, Qing Juanhe and the others would definitely die. As Xiren's voice fell, the atmosphere at the scene suddenly changed. The temperature quickly dropped, and Li Shengkai and the others felt as if they had fallen into an ice cellar. In the next moment, without waiting for Li Shengkai and the others to speak, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three started to move without hesitation. After a whole night's rest yesterday, they had all recovered to their peak condition. Although Li Shengkai's team had a total of 8 people, they were no threat to them. Moreover, after experiencing being surrounded by the skeleton army, the advantage in numbers was no longer important to them. Vigorous yuanqi burst out from the bodies of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. They had already chosen their respective targets, and immediately attacked each other agilely. Li Shengkai and the others were stunned. They didn't expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to immediately take action. They didn't care about Qing Juanhe's previous persuasion at all. However, they were also cultivators with rich combat power. When they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three take action, they also went up to meet them. The battle broke out at this moment. Bang bang bang. The vigorous elemental energy mixed with the strong and ferocious strength constantly collided. The energy that spread out in all directions even shot out small holes that were almost 10 centimeters long on the ground. 12 people were entangled. Even if Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three only had 4 people, they still didn't fall into a disadvantageous position in a 1 versus 2 situation. At the sight of this, the surrounding cultivators who were watching the fight suddenly had interesting expressions on their faces. Such a good show suddenly happened. For them, it was a liveliness that they couldn't miss. The strength of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 to 4. They have just joined the Penglai Palace, but they are able to fight against 2. You know that Qing Juanhe and the others have been in the Penglai Palace for 3 to 4 years, they have been cultivators who have been in the Penglai Palace for 3 to 4 years. Their strength is indeed terrifying. Judging from this strength, I'm afraid they will definitely be members of the inner hall in the future. Fortunately, their contract beasts have just been contracted. If the strength of the contract beasts increases, then their combat power will be even more terrifying. Chapter 35-32. Previously, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had caused such a huge commotion in the outer hall that everyone already knew that they couldn't treat them as ordinary new disciples. However, many people still didn't know their true strength and had only heard about it from others. Now that they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 make a move, they could be considered to have witnessed the strength of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 with their own eyes. Among Li Xinkai's group, Qing Juanhe's strength was the strongest. He was at the 6th level of the Purple Realm and was much stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Di Beiqin didn't hesitate to confront Qing Juanhe. He saw that this guy was very unhappy. First, he had silently schemed against them behind their backs, and then he had come up with all these messy reasons to make them give up. He wasn't stupid and couldn't be more clear about what Qing Juanhe was thinking. If they had hesitated just now and chosen to deal with Qing Juanhe and the others later, then Qing Juanhe would have turned around and contacted the other disciples. At that time, the cultivators they would have to face wouldn't be as simple as the 8 people in front of them. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to make a move and didn't give this matter any leeway. Perhaps they had brought some trouble to Master Long this time, but there were some things that had to be done. If the other party schemed against them and they could still act as if nothing had happened, then that would be a real joke. Qing Juanhe had fought with Di Beiqin before, so he was very familiar with Di Beiqin's strength. Back then, when his strength was close to the 8th level of the Purple Realm, he had given Di Beiqin a lot of pressure when dealing with Di Beiqin. However, his cultivation was now only at the 6th level of the Purple Realm. Once Di Beiqin used his blood aura, the difference in strength between them would no longer exist. On the contrary, his strength would be inferior to Di Beiqin's. This was a very sullen situation. His strength had been declining for a while, but until now, he still hadn't recovered from this drop. Now that his opponent was right in front of him, he didn't have any chance of winning. This feeling made him even more uncomfortable. Di Beiqin, aren't you afraid that Master Long will blame you for doing this? Qing Juanhe couldn't help but ask when he saw Di Beiqin closing in on them. Hearing this, Di Beiqin chuckled and said, Master Long said that the previous matter was over, and no one was to play any tricks behind his back. Didn't you do the same? Now that you're asking me this question, isn't it a bit too ridiculous? Or do you think I'm not as courageous as you? Previously, I did go overboard by plotting against you behind your backs. However, if this continues, it won't benefit either of us. Why don't we think of another way to resolve this matter? Ever since he fought with Di Beiqin, Qing Juanhe understood the gap between them. If Di Beiqin really wanted to take his life, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to see the sun tomorrow. Under such circumstances, Qing Juanhe could only compromise. As long as Di Beichen agreed to let them go, then no matter what the conditions were, as long as it was something he could do, he wouldn't hesitate. Oh. Di Beichen raised his eyebrows, and the corners of his lips curled up a little. Then what other way do you think we can resolve this matter? Chapter 35-33. Seeing that Di Beichen had relented, Qing Juanhe could not help but feel delighted. What he was most worried about was that Di Beichen was unwilling to relent. As long as there was a glimmer of hope, any price would be much better than losing his life. At the same time, Li Shengkai, whom Bailey Hongzhuang was dealing with, was also begging for mercy. Under Bailey Hongzhuang's attack, he could only retreat step by step. However, Bailey Hongzhuang was closing in on him, leaving him with no way out. He was also very aggrieved. Logically speaking, he should be stronger than Bailey Hongzhuang, but Bailey Hongzhuang was a completely abnormal existence. Without using the blood aura field, his combat strength could not be compared to Bailey Hongzhuang, which made him feel frustrated. Junior sister Bailey, I didn't want to lie to you before. Li Shengkai begged for mercy while dodging Bailey Hongzhuang's attack. Bailey Hongzhuang's gaze was still cold. We treated you as a friend, so we believed what you said just now. We didn't expect you to trick us like this. Hearing this, Li Shenkai's expression turned ugly. Qing Juanhe threatened me. I had no choice. You guys are teammates. Do you think I'll believe you? Bailey Hongzhuang sneered, but in her heart, she looked down on Li Shengkai even more. At a time like this, he even betrayed his teammates. This guy was indeed not a trustworthy person. Speaking of which, it was not a bad thing that they could use this opportunity to understand what kind of person Li Shengkai was. Otherwise, if they trusted Li Shengkai in more serious matters in the future, they would probably suffer a greater loss. I'm telling the truth. Li Shengkai was also suffering. If he had not been forced to tell such a lie by Qing Juanhe, he would not have had the heart to deceive Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Now, what he regretted the most was that he did not tell Bailey Hongzhuang the truth back then. Then, he would not be in such a situation now. On the contrary, he was very likely to get Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three allies, which would be of great help to him. Unfortunately, a single slip would cause everlasting regret. No matter how much he regretted it now, it was useless. It's meaningless for you to say this now. Since you want to take our lives, you should have been prepared to lose your life. Bailey Hongzhuang's delicate and beautiful face was filled with indifference. She had no sympathy for Li Shengkai at all. She raised her hand and attacked Li Shenkai's vital points. Junior sister Bailey, I beg you, please forgive me this time. I'll never do anything to deceive you in the future. Although Li Shengkai tried his best to dodge, more and more wounds appeared on his body. He was no match for Bailey Hongzhuang in the first place. In addition, he had already lost his fighting spirit. Naturally, the situation was getting worse and worse. In the future, no matter what you ask me to do, I'll do whatever you say. How about you let me live? Li Shengkai kept begging for mercy. The wounds on his body kept hurting him. He had a hunch that if this continued, he would disappear from this world soon. It was not easy for him to get to this point. He did not want to lose his life just like that. However, Bailey Hongzhuang did not care about what Li Shengkai said. Once disloyal, 100 times would not be tolerated. Li Shenkai's words could no longer convince them. Chapter 35-34. When Bailey Hongzhuang rejected Li Shengkai, Di Beichen's words also made Qing Juanhe's expression turn extremely ugly. I don't have any requests for you, Di Beichen glanced at Qing Juanhe. I just want you to leave your life here. Di Beichen's tone was somewhat cold and mocking, making Qing Juanhe look even more like a fool. If you don't remove the roots when you cut the weeds, they will grow again when the spring breeze blows. For a cultivator like Qing Juanhe who had no bottom line, letting him live was tantamount to inviting endless trouble. Di Beichen had never been a person who liked trouble. He preferred to settle things neatly to avoid future troubles. Are you trying to force me into a dead end? Qing Juanhe's expression was gloomy. He gritted his teeth and looked at Di Beichen, a trace of disbelief faintly flashing in his eyes. He had completely underestimated the determination of Di Beichen and the others, and Di Beichen's strength made him feel that he could not escape. Thinking that he might really die here, he could not help but panic. Di Beichen's sword-like eyebrows raised slightly, and the corners of his lips curved into a devilish smile. He said, "I'm trying to force you into a dead end, so what? A life and death struggle won't do either of us any good," Qing Juanhe emphasized. Hearing this, Di Beichen chuckled. "You're thinking too much. It's not a life and death struggle between us at all, because only you can die, and nothing will happen to me." As Di Beichen's voice fell, Qing Juanhe only felt a mouthful of blood in his heart. Although he knew that Di Beichen was telling the truth, it was enough to make him angry half to death. If his cultivation had not inexplicably decreased so much, he would not have fallen into such a situation. "Aren't you afraid of Master Long's punishment?" Qing Juanhe did not give up. Di Beichen stabbed his sword towards Qing Juanhe, his voice cold and resolute. "You don't have to worry about that." Among Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Shangguan Yingying was the most ruthless. She had been holding this grudge in her heart for a very long time. Ever since they had gone to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples, she had always kept this matter in her heart. After experiencing the skeleton army incident, her resentment had become even stronger, and she had been holding it in without a place to vent. As time passed, her resentment naturally deepened. Now that she finally had a chance, she could be said to have no scruples at all. She only wanted to take the other party's life. Only then could she truly vent her anger. When everyone saw Shangguan Yingying's ruthless and decisive manner, they could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. From what had happened before, they already knew that among Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, Shangguan Yingying's temper was the most explosive. At this moment, it was vividly displayed. Most importantly, they discovered that although Shangguan Yingying and Xiren did not have a heaven-defying existence like the blood force field, they also possessed the strength to fight above their level. They were clearly in a situation of 1 against 2, so logically speaking, they should have been at a disadvantage. However, the situation was the complete opposite. The two opponents had been chased all over the place, and it was difficult for them to hold on. They could not help but feel extremely surprised by such a battle record. Such strength was not something that could be easily obtained. Chapter 35-35. I'm afraid that Qing Juanhe and the others are doomed this time. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three are clearly determined to take their lives. There's no room for refusal at all. That's normal. The training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples are very dangerous. It's a miracle that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were able to return safely. If it were you, I'm sure you wouldn't let them go so easily. I can see that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three are definitely not easy to bully. If they don't have enough strength, I think it's better for them to keep their grudges in their hearts. Otherwise, it's really not worth it to put their lives on the line. Qing Juanhe has suffered a great loss this time. The surrounding cultivators sighed. Among them, there were many cultivators whose strength had decreased because of Bailey Hongzhuang's poison. Although Master Long had already given the order to let this matter pass, they were still somewhat dissatisfied. With their cultivation declining like this, it meant that they would have to waste a few more years before they could reach the same level. This might not seem like a big deal, but as disciples of the Penglai Palace, the possibility of becoming an inner palace disciple was greatly reduced. This was what everyone found most difficult to accept. It had to be said that during these days, there were many people who were scheming in their hearts. They were all thinking about how they could take revenge on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, after seeing Qing Juanhe's fate, they could not help but dismiss the idea in their minds. It was never too late for a gentleman to take revenge. It would be the stupidest thing to do if they lost their lives because of this. Thinking of this, everyone could not help but thank Qing Juanhe and the others. If they had not taken the lead and taught them a lesson, they would have been unlucky as well. However, this time, Qing Juanhe and the others were likely to be doomed. After Ren Ziheng and the others returned to the inner palace, they immediately handed in the mission and set off to look for their teachers. This matter is very special. We have to inform the teachers as soon as possible. If there are any changes in the training grounds later, everyone can be prepared in advance. A serious expression appeared on Ren Ziheng's face. He had stayed in the inner hall for quite some time, so he knew very well what kind of effect the change in this training ground would have on everyone. Just based on the situation in the past, they had already encountered a lot of obstacles during their training. There were dangers everywhere. This time, the situation was really too dangerous. If it weren't for the coincidence of everyone working together, they would have already become one of the skeletons. Therefore, now that such a huge change had occurred, they had to inform the cultivators in the inner hall of the news as soon as possible. Only then would everyone be able to take precautions. Hearing Ren Ziheng's words, Ren Zimei and the others nodded. That's right. This matter is too important. We have to let the teacher know first. Chu Jinfeng's expression was equally serious as he said in a deep voice, previously, teacher said that no matter what happens in the training grounds, we must inform him immediately. Thinking of this, everyone couldn't help but quicken their pace. When Yi Zihua saw that Ren Ziheng and the others had returned safely, he couldn't help but smile. You've returned safely. Chapter 35-36. Yi Zihua nodded, you came looking for me as soon as you came back. Do you have something to report to me? Yi Zihua knew his disciples very well. If nothing had happened, the first thing they would do after returning was to have a good rest instead of coming to him immediately. Ren Ziheng nodded, Instructor Yi, we do have something to report to you. It's about what happened in the training ground. Looking at the serious look on Ren Ziheng's face, Yi Zihua asked, what happened? In the next second, Ren Ziheng, Ren Zimei, and the others looked at each other and then told Yi Zihua everything that happened in the training ground. Following Ren Ziheng's words, Yi Zihua's calm and tranquil face was also filled with astonishment. You're saying that 4 pits and 4 liches appeared in the training ground at once? Yi Zihua was in disbelief. This was something that had never happened in the training ground. That's right. This matter greatly exceeded our expectations. We almost couldn't make it back. Ren Ziheng replied with certainty, Instructor Yi, this situation is really unusual. I'm afraid this is the first time something like this has happened. I just don't know if something similar will happen in the future. If the same thing happens again in the future, it'll be impossible for our disciples to guard against it. We need to increase the number of people in our group. Otherwise, we'll be wiped out if we run into them, Jing Tianlang said. A solemn expression appeared on Yi Zihua's face. Are you sure that everything you said is the truth? Yes, we all saw this with our own eyes. There's absolutely nothing to hide. If you don't believe me, you can ask the other disciples. Looking at the serious look on Ren Ziheng's and the others' faces, Yi Zihua nodded slightly. He had a certain understanding of his disciples. Ren Ziheng had always been a steady person. His words and actions were not exaggerated in the slightest, and he would not make up lies. Since he said so, then it must be true. It was just that the situation was too inconceivable and hard to believe. If I remember correctly, your mission during this time is to take care of the injured? Yi Zihua asked slowly. Yes, Ren Ziheng replied. Yi Zihua frowned. Since you're taking care of the wounded, then your team's combat power should be very weak. How did you survive with 4 holes? On this point, even Yi Zihua could not understand. He was very clear about the strength of his disciples. Once 4 holes appeared, even they would not have any chance of surviving. Teacher, this matter is all thanks to a few disciples from the outer hall who accidentally entered the inner hall training grounds. Ren Zimei said with a smile. As soon as he said this, the surprise on Yi Zihua's face became even more intense. Oh. This matter is actually related to the Outer Palace disciples. That's right. These Outer Palace disciples should have just joined the Outer Palace. We've never seen them before. According to what you're saying, it was the performance of these Outer Palace disciples that allowed all of you to escape from danger. Chapter 35-37. The strength of the Inner Palace disciples had always been stronger than the Outer Palace disciples. This time, the situation was so dangerous. Logically speaking, the Outer Palace disciples should have died. However, not only did they not die, they even helped the Inner Palace disciples escape. It was really unbelievable. Looking at Yi Zihua's incredulous expression, Ren Ziheng and the others were not surprised. In fact, no matter who they told, they would find it hard to believe. If they had not experienced it personally, they would not have believed it either if it was someone else who told them. Instructor Yi, these 4 Outer Palace disciples are really strong. I think they will become the most outstanding disciples of the Inner Palace in the future. Ren Ziheng thought of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 and his eyes were filled with admiration. Looking at Ren Ziheng's praise of the 4 Outer Palace disciples, Yi Zihua's eyes were also filled with interest. Since you all praise them so much, I believe that the strength of these 4 Outer Palace disciples is indeed very good. I wonder which 4 disciples they are. After you tell me their names, I will take a closer look. At this moment, Yi Zihua was already very interested in the Outer Palace disciples that everyone was talking about. If Penglai Palace had such good seedlings, he naturally could not miss them. He had to pay more attention to them. If he could promote them to the Inner Palace as soon as possible, that would be excellent. They are Di Beichen, Bailey Hongzhuang, Wen Ziren and Shangguan Yingying, Ren Ziheng said slowly. As Ren Ziheng's voice fell, Yi Zihua's expression changed. His expression suddenly became interesting. Previously, he was still a little surprised. Since the 4 disciples were very strong, why would they accidentally enter the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples? After all, this usually happened when a cultivator was tricked. However, now that he knew who the 4 people were, he understood what was going on. If one were to ask who was the most unpopular cultivator in the Outer Palace, it would undoubtedly be Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. It was hard to understand if it happened to others, but it was normal for it to happen to Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. After all, the 4 of them had made several hundred enemies in the Outer Palace. The slightest bit of carelessness would cause them to fall into a trap. Similarly, if it was said that other Outer Palace disciples possessed such abilities, he would not believe it. However, if it was said that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 possessed such abilities, he had no choice but to believe it. It should be known that the commotion caused by Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 in the outer hall was unprecedented in the Penglai Palace. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, he would not have believed that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 could fight against hundreds of disciples. This battle record was too abnormal. So it's them. A smile appeared on Yi Zihua's lips. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 were really amazing. It had only been a short period of time, but it had actually brought him such a huge surprise. During this period of time, he had not seen Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He thought that they had gone to the training ground of the Outer Palace disciples. He did not expect the four of them to go directly to the training ground of the Inner Palace disciples. Moreover, their battle record was so good. Looking at Yi Zihua's understanding look, Ren Ziheng and the others could not help but look at each other. They were surprised. "Instructor Yi, do you know them?" Chapter 35-38. Listening to Yi Zihua's words, Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but look at each other. There was a trace of surprise in their eyes. They didn't know that the fame of Bailey Hongzhuang's group was so big that even their mentors had heard of them. Logically speaking, outer hall disciples were usually not valued by inner hall mentors, unless they were cultivators who had extremely outstanding performances and were not far from being promoted to inner hall disciples. However, according to their understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had just joined Penglai Palace. How could they have gained the attention of inner hall mentors so quickly? This speed was a little too fast. It had never happened in the history of Penglai Palace. "Mentor Yi, are they very famous in the outer hall?" "Why didn't I know?" Chu Jinfeng frowned. He had always been well informed about the news in the outer hall. Logically speaking, he should have known about the appearance of such people. Yi Zihua smiled faintly and said, "Since it's them, I have to inform Long Yanwei first." As Yi Zihua's voice fell, everyone was slightly stunned. They could not help but think of a possibility. Mentor Yi, the cultivators who were rumored in the outer hall to have received a contract beast as a gift from Master Long, could it be them? Ren Ziheng looked at Yi Zihua. If he had not thought of this before, now that Yi Zihua mentioned Long Yanwei, there was only one possibility left when these two things were connected. "It seems that you know them well," Yi Zihua said with a smile. As soon as these words came out, everyone understood. Suddenly, their expressions became a little more interesting. Chu Jinfeng could not help but remember when he first met Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. He had asked them about these guys who had turned the outer hall upside down. He did not expect it to be Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. As soon as he remembered Bailey Hongzhuang's faint awkward expression, he understood. It turns out that the famous cultivators in the outer hall are the four of them. We were too slow to realize it. Ren Zimei's face revealed a sigh, and there was a hint of annoyance. She should have thought of it back then, but she didn't expect her reaction to be so slow. Only now did she understand the crux of the matter. That's right. There are also four famous disciples in the outer palace. They are also four people. Plus, they are also very popular. Why didn't we think of that? Ren Ziheng couldn't help but pat his own head. He originally wanted to wait until he had reported this matter to the teacher before he went to see the few disciples from the outer palace. After all, to be able to obtain Lord Long's contracted beast as an outer palace disciple was not an easy task. Unexpectedly, he had already met Lord Long, Yi Zihua chuckled, "You guys were able to get to know them so early and get along so well. This is also a kind of fate, Instructor Yi, will they be joining the inner palace soon?" Ren Zimei could not help but ask. Just from Long Yanwei's different attitude towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, it was enough to prove that their starting point was completely different from the ordinary outer palace disciples. Becoming an inner palace disciple was already a sure thing, and the rest was only a matter of time. Chapter 35-39. Long Yanwei was originally resting in his house, but when Yi Zihua suddenly sent someone to find him, he immediately went to Yi Zihua's residence. As soon as he walked into the house, Long Yanwei saw Ren Ziheng and the others standing there, and a hint of surprise appeared on his handsome and calm face. His gaze then landed on Yi Zihua and said, "Why are you in such a hurry to find me? Could it be that something has happened?" Yi Zihua nodded, "Something has indeed happened. I think you need to understand it." Noticing that Yi Zihua's expression was extremely serious, and there was even a hint of seriousness, Long Yanwei's expression also changed a little, and he carefully listened to Yi Zihua's description. "You're saying that the situation in the training grounds has changed. 4 pits have appeared at once, and the frequency of the liches has greatly increased?" Long Yanwei said in a deep voice. "That's right. If such a situation really occurs, then when our disciples go to the training grounds in the future, the danger will greatly increase. It is absolutely not to be ignored." "You're right." Long Yanwei's gaze sank, and his face was filled with thought. There will be some new changes in the training grounds every few years. Whether it's the skeletons or the liches, there will be some new changes. Compared to the last time, it has indeed been a long time, so it's not too strange for such a situation to occur. In my opinion, it's better for us to inform the Hall Master of this matter first. We still need to send someone to understand the specific situation in detail. The Hall Master has already returned. We should indeed report this news as soon as possible. Long Yanwei nodded, and then his gaze shifted to Ren Ziheng and the others. 4 pits appeared at once, and you little fellows were still able to return alive. Looks like your recent growth in strength is not bad. As expected of Yi Zihua's favorite disciple. Following Long Yanwei's words, Yi Zihua laughed softly, and then said, "Speaking of this matter, the reason why they were able to return safely has a lot to do with you." The moment these words were spoken, Long Yanwei could not help but be stunned. He frowned slightly and said, "What does this have to do with me? The reason they were able to return safely is all thanks to the 4 cultivators you recruited. Otherwise, they would have been completely wiped out this time." Yi Zihua looked at Long Yanwei in admiration. "This time, I really have to admire your foresight. You've really recruited 4 genius cultivators." If Long Yanwei didn't understand what Yi Zihua meant before, now that he heard him mention 4 cultivators, he immediately understood. He didn't recruit any cultivators recently, and the only ones he recruited were Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. "Are you saying that this matter has something to do with Di Beichen and the others?" Long Yanwei couldn't help but ask. "That's right, it's them." Yi Zihua chuckled, "Their battle prowess is truly extraordinary. When they caused such a commotion in the outer hall, it was already shocking. I did not expect that with their strength, they would be able to achieve such a feat in the training grounds of the inner hall. This has truly exceeded my expectations." However, after hearing Yi Zihua's words, the confusion in Long Yanwei's heart grew even stronger. Chapter 35-40. What do you think is the reason? Yi Zihua asked instead of answering the question. Long Yanwei pondered for a second after hearing Yi Zihua's words. He raised his eyebrows and asked, "Were they tricked?" Yi Zihua nodded. "With their popularity in the outer palace, this situation isn't strange at all." Ren Ziheng and the others couldn't help but laugh when they heard this. Even though they hadn't seen it before, they felt that it was normal when they thought about the reputation of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 in the outer palace. "By the way, Instructor Yi, according to our understanding this time, one of the liches seems to have evolved." "The liches have evolved?" Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei looked at Ren Ziheng together with surprise in their eyes. Ren Ziheng nodded, but his voice was filled with uncertainty. "We can't be completely sure about this matter, but the last lich is indeed different from the liches we've seen before. The person who understands this the most is Bailey Hongzhuang. She was also the one who proposed the lich's evolution." "Why is Bailey Hongzhuang the one who understands it the most?" "Because in the process, Bailey Hongzhuang had been using her zither technique to deal with the lich's chanting. If it wasn't for her suppressing the lich's chanting, we wouldn't have been able to come back alive. Ren Ziheng had no intention of hiding anything. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were indeed their saviors this time, especially Bailey Hongzhuang's outstanding performance. This was something they couldn't hide at all. Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei's eyes lit up when they heard Ren Ziheng's words. They asked again, "You're saying that Bailey Hongzhuang has a way to suppress the lich's chanting?" "That's right. When we first discovered this, we were also very surprised. However, later on, the situation showed that Bailey Hongzhuang's zither technique can really suppress the lich's chanting. Moreover, it has a certain restraining effect on the skeleton army." As Ren Ziheng spoke, Ren Zimei and the others also expressed their opinions, proving that everything Ren Ziheng had said was true. Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei looked at each other. If all of this was true, then Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had really brought them a huge surprise. One must know that the skeleton army and the lich had been around for a long time. Dealing with the skeleton army only required violent means. But to deal with the lich, no one could think of a good method. Under the protection of the skeleton army, everyone had to pay a huge price to deal with the liches, and they had no idea how to suppress the lich's chanting. Every time a lich appeared, it gave everyone a headache. Who would have thought that Bailey Hongzhuang would have a way to subdue a lich? It was a pleasant surprise. We already know about this matter. You guys have worked hard this time. Go back and have a good rest. Leave the rest to me. Yi Zihua looked at Ren Ziheng and the others and said slowly. When they heard this, Ren Ziheng and the others understood that Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei were going to deal with this matter, and they immediately bowed and bid their farewells. Chapter 35-41. Long Yanwei smiled faintly. Originally, I was a little worried that the incident last time was too big and I didn't know how to report it to the palace master when he returns. Now that we have such a reward, I can report it to the palace master. Haha. Yi Zihua let out a hearty laugh. You're right. The commotion caused by these fellows last time was simply too big. It was indeed difficult to explain to the palace master. Now, we don't have to worry. With the results they have obtained this time, the previous troubles are nothing. Long Yanwei glanced at Yi Zihua and said, "Now, let's find Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three so that we can understand the situation better." Yi Zihua nodded and immediately sent people to the outer hall to find Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. When Ren Ziheng and the others found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were the outer hall disciples that they had been very interested in, they sighed in their hearts. I really didn't expect them to be the outer hall disciples who have been in the limelight recently. We're really too late to realize it. Ren Zimei shook her head and sighed. No wonder their strength is so outstanding. When I heard that they had caused trouble in the outer hall, I didn't quite believe it. After all, their battle results were too frightening. But now, I believe it. Just by looking at their battle strength against the skeleton army, nothing is impossible. Chu Jinfeng's face revealed a look of amazement. He had been half believing and half doubting before, thinking that the rumors were exaggerated. Now, he firmly believed it without a doubt. I understand why Di Beichen was not the least bit nervous when facing Duan Huali. On the contrary, he dared to go tit for tat. With his strength in the inner hall, he will definitely be an influential figure in the future. Ren Ziheng slowly said. Isn't that great? Chu Jinfeng's eyes lit up. Duan Huali definitely doesn't know the true identity of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. If he knew, I'm sure he would be more restrained. Just as they were walking towards their residence, they saw Yi Zihua's men quickly walking towards their direction. Everyone couldn't help but be curious and asked what the other party was going to do. When they found out that the other party was going to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, their faces were filled with joy. Let's go take a look as well. They've been hiding our true identities. Now that we know, we can't pretend that we don't know. Chu Jinfeng's face flashed with interest. Although Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had never told them their true identities, he didn't think it was a big deal. In his heart, after the previous battle, they were already friends who went through life and death together. Moreover, they were not stupid people. They all understood why Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were hiding the truth from them. After all, they had obtained a contract beast as a gift from Lord Long. This matter was indeed too enviable. Just outside the outer hall, they had already caused such a huge commotion. If it were him, he wouldn't dare to reveal his true identity to the disciples of the inner hall. If he wasn't careful, it would attract even more trouble and could even lead to a fatal disaster. Hearing Chu Jinfeng's words, Ren Zimei and the others couldn't help but look at each other. They then nodded and smiled. Chapter 35-42. When Ren Ziheng and the others followed Yi Zihua's men to the outer hall to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three, they did not see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three at their residence. After asking around, they found out that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had not returned to their residence. Seeing this, Ren Ziheng and the others could not help but look at each other. They have obviously returned, but they have not returned to their residence. Could it be that as soon as they came back, they immediately went to find someone to settle the score? Ren Zimei could not help but ask. This is very likely. They were set up before and must have been holding it in. Now that they are back, it is normal for them to seek revenge. Chu Jinfeng nodded, and his eyes gradually brightened. Other than this possibility, he could not think of any other reason. Just thinking about Shangguan Yingying's violent temper, I think this is the only reason. A smile appeared in Ren Ziheng's eyes. I'm afraid there will be a good show to watch. Seeing that Chu Jinfeng and Ren Zimei had the same idea as her, Ren Zimei also sighed. She did not expect Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three to be so efficient. They had just returned, and without resting, they had already gone to look for them. It seemed that Shangguan Yingying was not the only one in their team with a violent temper, but all of them were very impatient. Yi Zihua's men did not know what was going on at first, but now that he heard the conversation between Ren Ziheng and the others, he understood. You mean Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three went to seek revenge? If we guessed correctly, that should be the case. Then do you know where they went to seek revenge? Yi Zihua's men were a little helpless. He did not know much about Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. The outer hall of Penglai Palace was not very big, but it was not small either. If he did not know anything, it would take some time to find them. Then we don't know. Ren Ziheng frowned. They only knew that Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three had been tricked by the cultivators from the outer palace. However, they did not know who exactly it was. They had asked about it before, but Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were very firm. They wanted to leave this matter to them, so they didn't ask too much. Moreover, now that they knew the true identities of Bailey Hongzhuang's group, they were clearly aware of how many enemies Bailey Hongzhuang's group had in the outer palace. As for which enemy they were looking for, it was not something that could be determined in a short period of time. That's going to be troublesome. Yi Zihua's subordinate had a worried look on his face. Yi Zihua had asked him to look for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three because he had something to ask of them. However, judging from the current situation, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to find them for a while. Seeing this, Ren Ziheng couldn't help but say, why don't we split up and look for it? If I'm not mistaken, they should be in the residence of the outer palace disciples. They won't go anywhere else. Hearing this, the man's eyes lit up and he said, then I'll have to trouble you. It's fine. Immediately after, Ren Ziheng and the others split up and looked for Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. They were very interested in Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three's revenge. They wondered how far they would go. Chapter 35-43. At the same time, a burst of noise came from the front. Seeing this scene, Ren Ziheng and the others, who were about to split up to search, could not help but stop in their tracks. They looked at each other, and their expressions suddenly became interesting. No one spoke, but their eyes were focused on the same place. In the next second, everyone walked forward without hesitation. As everyone gradually approached, they found that most of the cultivators had gathered in front of them. The area was completely surrounded, and even they found it difficult to enter. Such a big commotion, could it be caused by Junior Brother D and the others? Ren Zimei asked in surprise. Chu Jinfeng chuckled, if I didn't know the true identity of Junior Brother D and the others, I definitely wouldn't have thought that such a big commotion would be caused by them. However, after knowing their true identity, I feel that there is no one else in such a situation other than them. As soon as these words came out, Ren Zimei and the others looked at each other and felt that Chu Jinfeng's words were extremely reasonable. If this is really caused by them, then it's really beyond my expectations. Ren Ziheng sighed. Previously, he had always thought that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were very outstanding, but they had always been very low-key and humble. However, now it seemed that they were extraordinarily high-profile in the outer hall. The number of onlookers was really too many. Ren Ziheng and the others tried their best to squeeze in, but found that they could not even find a gap. However, even if they did not see what happened in front of them clearly, they could determine the main characters of the incident from the discussions of the surrounding cultivators. Li Xingkai and the others are definitely going to die now. I didn't expect them to court death by going against Bailey Hongzhuang and the others. It's expected that they would end up like this. From the beginning, I felt that Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were not ordinary people. Fortunately, I didn't offend them before. According to my prediction, they will definitely be the 4 ruthless people of Penglai Palace in the future. You're right. In my opinion, if we can't build a good relationship with Bailey Hongzhuang and the others in the future, at least we can't offend them. Otherwise, we will really suffer the consequences. Ren Ziheng and the others also heard the conversations of the crowd clearly. They could not help but sigh in their hearts. These words were not said from the mouths of 1 or 2 cultivators, but many cultivators in the outer palace held such an attitude. This proved that although Bailey Hongzhuang's group of 4 was not very popular in the outer palace, in everyone's hearts, they were already very powerful. They had only been in Penglai Palace for a short time, but they could make everyone be so sure of their strength. This was not something an ordinary cultivator could do. This alone had already laid the foundation for their future development. The sounds of fighting kept coming, and Ren Ziheng and the others also knew that Li Xingkai and his men were retreating step by step under the attacks of Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3. Even if they kept begging for mercy, it was to no avail. Chapter 35-44. This is also a good thing. Otherwise, Duan Huali would think too highly of himself. Ren Zimei could not help but curl her lips at the mention of Duan Huali. She could not hide the disgust that was spreading from the bottom of her heart. I'm actually looking forward to Duan Huali finding out the truth later. Only then will there be a good show to watch. Chu Jinfeng smiled. Yi Zihua's subordinate took a look at the situation and could not help but frown. He did not expect such a scene after arriving. It was very difficult to squeeze in. Most importantly, based on his understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 had caused a huge commotion in the outer hall. It had only calmed down recently. He did not expect it to start again. Thinking of this, the man could not help but look at Ren Ziheng and the others. He said, the commotion now is really too big. I'll go back and report to Instructor E first. Hearing this, Ren Ziheng and the others nodded. If there was no instructor to oversee the situation, it would be impossible to evacuate everyone. Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei had been waiting in the room to see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. However, after waiting for a long time, they did not see anyone return. The two of them could not help but frown. Logically speaking, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three should have been found after such a long time. Why was there no movement at all? Just as the two of them were wondering if something had happened, a knock on the door rang out. The two of them could not help but sigh in relief. "Come in," Yi Zihua slowly said. In the next moment, Yi Zihua's subordinate walked in. After he walked in, Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei looked around. However, they did not see Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three behind him. The two of them could not help but feel puzzled. Why aren't they here? Yi Zihua asked in surprise. Instructor E, they seem to have caused some trouble outside. Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei were stunned when they heard this. What trouble? I went to the outer palace and found them fighting with other cultivators. The situation was very intense. Almost all the cultivators in the outer palace were attracted to them. Now, that area is completely surrounded. Even if I wanted to squeeze in, there's no other way. The man helplessly reported the situation he saw in full detail. After understanding the situation, Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei couldn't help but look at each other. Who knew that a helpless expression would appear on both of their faces? Yanwei, I have to say that you have a good eye for people. However, the way these four little fellows stir up trouble is not ordinary. Now that they've just returned, they've already caused such a huge commotion. I'm afraid that in the future, there won't be a moment of peace in the outer palace. Chapter 35-45. Forget it. Since we have nothing to do now, why don't we go outside and take a look? Long Yanwei pondered for a moment before speaking. Yi Zihua nodded. All right. When Yi Zihua and Long Yanwei arrived at the outer palace disciples' quarters, they noticed a sea of people. Almost all the outer palace disciples had gathered together. From their point of view, all they could see was a sea of heads. They could not see Bailey Hongzhuang and the others at all. However, based on the fluctuation of yuan power, they could still determine that a battle was taking place at the center of the crowd. Lord Long and Instructor E are here. Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua's appearance had undoubtedly attracted the crowd's attention. Hence, cultivators immediately began to spread the news. Long Yanwei and Instructor Yi's appearance had clearly exceeded the crowd's expectations. In an instant, the crowd's expressions became very interesting. I never thought that Lord Long and the others would actually show up. Could it be that they had specially rushed over after hearing about Bailey Hongzhuang and the others? Now that Lord Long and the others have appeared, Li Shengkai and the others can be saved. Sigh, I never thought that Cheng Juanhe and the others would be so lucky. They were already at death's door and there was still a chance for them to turn things around. Cheng Juanhe's face was extremely pale and the wounds on his body were increasing. He was almost certain that he would not be able to live past today. However, just as he was about to lose all hope, he suddenly heard from the crowd that Lord Long and Instructor E had appeared. To him, these words were no different from the sounds of nature and had saved him from hell. A hint of color quickly returned to his originally pale face. His eyes were filled with joy as he looked at Di Baichen. Lord Long and the others have arrived. I advise you to stop now. A hint of hesitation flashed across Di Baichen's face when he found out that Long Yanwei and Instructor E had arrived. This had truly exceeded his expectations. However, regardless of whether Long Yanwei and Instructor E had arrived or not, he would definitely kill Cheng Juanhe. At the same time, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others paused for a moment. They were almost done with their task, but they didn't expect Master Long and the others to come. Should they continue or stop? It was a question that they had to consider. After all, if they continued to attack, it would probably cause Long Yanwei to feel displeased. But if they stopped, then Qing Juanhe and the others would think of a way to escape, and even find more opponents to deal with them. In this way, things would become much more troublesome. When Qing Juanhe saw Di Beichen and the others hesitating, the smile on his face couldn't help but widen. He said, "I advise you to stop now. Otherwise, when Lord Long blames you, you won't be able to bear the consequences." It's best that you don't mention the matter of us tricking you all to the training grounds of the Inner Palace disciples. Even if you mention it, we will not admit to it. No one will believe you without any proof. A thick smile appeared on Qing Juanhe's face. It was as if he had found his backbone in an instant, and he became somewhat unrestrained. Di Beichen frowned slightly when he saw Qing Juanhe's smug look. In the next moment, a dark light flashed in his bottomless black eyes. So what if other people don't believe you? A guy like you should just die and be reincarnated. Chapter 35-46. Qing Juanhe did not expect that Di Beichen would still dare to attack him after Master Long appeared. In his opinion, Di Beichen should be very wary of Master Long. Now that Master Long appeared, Di Beichen would stop immediately and even think about how to explain this matter to Master Long. However, he never expected that Di Beichen would not play by the rules. Caught off guard, Di Beichen's attack completely landed on Qing Juanhe's body. Bang! Qing Juanhe's figure flew out and felt a huge force hit his body. Intense pain came from his internal organs, and his whole body felt as if it was about to shatter. Everyone was dumbfounded after seeing Di Beichen's actions. No one expected that Di Beichen would dare to do such an outrageous thing under such circumstances. However, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other two's reactions were completely different from the onlookers. After seeing Di Beichen attack, they did not hesitate to speed up their movements. Since the enmity between the two sides had already been formed, the final outcome would inevitably be the fall of one side. Today, they had already come to this point, and there was no possibility of reconciliation between the two sides. Why waste time and give the other side more time to prepare? Wouldn't that be causing trouble for themselves? Therefore, Bailey Hongzhuang and the others only looked at each other, and in the next second, they directly took each other's lives. Li Xingkai originally thought that his savior had arrived, and he could not help but feel happy in his heart. His gaze towards Bailey Hongzhuang became a little more resentful. He begged for mercy in every possible way, but he only received cold words from the other party, who did not give him any chance at all. He also bore a grudge against Bailey Hongzhuang, and only hoped that after this matter was over, he could get back at her. However, after seeing the flash of killing intent in Bailey Hongzhuang's eyes, he could not help but feel a strong sense of fear in his heart. "Lord Long, save me!" Li Xingkai shouted. His sharp voice cut through the sky and resounded in the crowd. After Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua appeared, the surrounding cultivators all opened up a path for them to enter. Suddenly hearing Li Xingkai's call, Long Yanwei couldn't help but frown, and his footsteps quickened. As Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua walked into the crowd, they saw Bailey Hongzhuang's sharp blade fiercely stabbing into Li Xingkai's chest. There was no hesitation at all, only decisiveness and decisiveness. Li Xingkai's eyes widened as he stared blankly at Bailey Hongzhuang. His face was still filled with disbelief. He simply could not believe that Bailey Hongzhuang dared to take his life in front of Master Long. However, the intense pain in his body was real, and so was the blood flowing out of his chest. He could only feel his life gradually slipping away. No matter how hard he tried to believe it, this ending could no longer be changed. While Bailey Hongzhuang was doing this, Di Beichen, Wen Ziren, and Shangguan Yingying had also taken care of the other cultivators. Chapter 35-47. Since they had already done it, they might as well do it all at once. Ren Ziheng and the others followed behind Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua and arrived at the center of the crowd. However, they were dumbfounded when they saw what had happened. There were clearly many cultivators surrounding them, but at this moment, the surroundings were strangely quiet. Astonished gazes gathered on Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three. Their gazes were filled with shock and disbelief. However, the silence only lasted for a short while. When the crowd finally returned to their senses, discussions quickly surged like a tidal wave. Heavens, Di Beichen and the others are too audacious. Lord Long is already here and they still dare to attack. Aren't they worried about Lord Long's punishment? From what I can see, they're worried that it would be troublesome to deal with Cheng Juanhe and the others after Lord Long has stopped them. That's why they might as well use this opportunity to get rid of them all at once. That's true, but they're not giving Lord Long any face by doing this in front of him. The crowd sighed. For a moment, their gazes towards Bailey Hongzhuang and the others were filled with excitement. Ren Ziheng and the others clearly did not expect this to happen. Bailey Hongzhuang and the others had still done this after Lord Long had appeared. It was no different from challenging Lord Long's dignity. What they've done seems to be a bit out of line. A worried look appeared on Ren Ziheng's face. If there were not so many cultivators around or if Lord Long had not appeared, the situation would not have been so serious. After all, as long as they had gotten rid of Li Shengkai and the others before Lord Long appeared, even if Lord Long was angry, it would be after the fact. However, he believed that the punishment would not be too severe by then. However, with so many cultivators around, Lord Long was in a very awkward position in front of so many people. If he did not punish them severely, it would be difficult to convince the crowd. Ren Ziheng's face flickered with a thoughtful light. He then said in a deep voice, "Actually, their actions are not wrong. If we give them a chance to breathe, I'm afraid that they'll be in even more trouble in the future." Although we don't know what kind of role Li Shengkai and the others have in the outer palace, the fact that they were able to trick Bailey Hongzhuang and the others into going to the training grounds of the inner palace is enough to prove that their methods are not simple. But if that's the case, I'm afraid there will be some estrangement between Master Long and them. Chu Jinfeng said slowly. According to his understanding, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three were recruited into the Penglai Palace by Master Long. They also received Master Long's favor and obtained 3 contract beasts. This was the first time in the history of the Penglai Palace. Logically speaking, they should have a very good relationship with Master Long, but now that this had happened, he couldn't tell how things would develop in the future. When Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua saw this scene, their expressions could not help but change. Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3 reacted very quickly. After putting away their weapons, they immediately bowed to Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua and said respectfully, "Greetings, Master Long, greetings, Instructor Yi." Long Yanwei and Yi Zihua felt helpless when they saw Bailey Hongzhuang and the other 3's calm faces. Chapter 35-48. Why are Master Long and Instructor Yi free to come to the outer hall today? Di Beichen's face was filled with a humble and polite smile, as if he wasn't the one who had taken their lives. That's right, we just came back from our training and were preparing to visit Master Long and Instructor Yi later. Ziren's face also quickly revealed a sunny smile. His entire person was as bright as the morning sun, as if he didn't know their current situation at all. It was as if killing Li Shengkai and the others was an extremely ordinary thing that had nothing to do with the environment in front of him. Bailey Hongzhuang and Shangguan Yingying also smiled as they looked at Long Yanwei and Xiren, revealing a bit of cleverness. That tranquil appearance had nothing to do with their previous ruthlessness. Seeing Di Beichen and the other three acting as if nothing had happened, Yi Zihua glanced at Long Yanwei. These guys aren't ordinary troublemakers. It seems like you have a lot of mess to clean up behind them. Hearing Yi Zihua's words, a trace of helplessness appeared on Long Yanwei's face. When these guys cheated him of the demon pet eggs, he already knew that these guys weren't easy to deal with. He had traveled extensively all these years, and there were very few people who could make him suffer. However, he had to admit that he had indeed fallen into the hands of these four little fellows. "What were you doing just now?" Long Yanwei slowly said. Hearing Long Yanwei's question, Bailey Hongzhuang and the other three couldn't help but look at each other. They were very clear in their hearts that their reckless actions just now had undoubtedly touched Long Yanwei's prestige. Especially in front of everyone, if they couldn't give an explanation, it would be tantamount to making Long Yanwei lose face. This wasn't a good thing. Firstly, Long Yanwei had always been very good to them, and they didn't want to make Long Yanwei lose face. Secondly, if Long Yanwei was dissatisfied with them because of this, this wasn't something they wanted to see. "Master Long, we were just dealing with some personal grudges." Di Beichen's expression was calm as he calmly narrated. In his opinion, this wasn't a big deal. In the outer hall, fights between cultivators had never stopped, and bloody incidents were common. This was something that everyone was used to. Right now, the most important thing was that after Master Long appeared, they still took the other party's life, which was somewhat disregarding Master Long's dignity. Therefore, as long as they could cover up this point, there wouldn't be any problems. Seeing Di Beichen's answer, Long Yanwei was somewhat speechless. His original intention of asking this question was, but Di Beichen's answer, which made him not knowing how to continue. When Ren Ziheng and the others saw that the situation seemed to be a little off, they couldn't help but stand up and say, "Master Long, these guys should be the ones who tricked them into coming to the inner hall to train. It's normal for such grievances to be resolved like this." "That's right. If it weren't for junior brother and junior sister's luck, they wouldn't have made it back alive," Ren Zimei said. "Every injustice has its perpetrator and every debt has its debtor. This is how it should be." Chu Jinfeng said, "You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."